For my 18th birthday, my grandpa handed over his company to me. However, my mom wants to strip it away and give it to my stepdad instead. She keeps insisting, I own everything here. I get to decide who lives where and who receives what. My grandpa, though, gave her the documents that proved otherwise. My name is Kristen, and I just turned 17 when everything started to fall apart. Growing up, I had what I thought was a pretty normal family. There was me, my little brother, who's 10 years younger than me, and our parents. Dad worked as a manager in Mom's family business, a company that my grandfather had built from scratch. It all started with a chain of coffee shops, which eventually grew into this big deal exclusive coffee selling company. Grandpa was a real go-getter, you know. But when he decided to retire, he didn't just sell off the business or let it die. No, he offered it to Mom. I remember overhearing that conversation. Mom's voice was clear as day, I'm happy being a housewife. Let John handle it. And that was that. Dad took over, and life went on. It wasn't until I hit my teens that I started noticing the cracks in our family's foundation. Mom and Dad began arguing more and more. Mom picked at every little thing Dad did or didn't do. It was like she was trying to provoke him, push him to his limits. Then, when he'd finally snap and raise his voice, she'd play the victim. See how he treats me? She'd sob at anyone who would listen. I'm just trying to keep this family together, and he yells at me. I didn't know what to think. I loved both my parents, but watching them tear each other apart was unbearable. My brother was too young to really understand what was happening, but I could see the confusion and fear in his eyes whenever Mom and Dad would go at it. One night, things came to a head. I was in my room trying to drown out their latest argument with music when I heard a crash. My heart racing, I ran downstairs to find a scene that would change everything. Mom was on the floor, Dad standing over her. She was screaming, he hit me. Dad looked desperate. I didn't touch her, Kristen. She fell. I was trying to help her up. But Mom was already on the phone calling the police. I stood there frozen, not knowing who to believe or what to do. In that moment, I felt like my whole world was collapsing around me. The night Dad was taken away by the police is etched into my memory. I couldn't sleep, my mind racing with questions. What really happened? Was Dad capable of hitting Mom? Why would Mom lie if he didn't? The next few days were a blur. Dad was released without charges, and Mom, in a show of what she called generosity, dropped the complaint. But the damage was done. The tension in our house was unbearable. Mom was relentless, painting Dad as this monster who'd been tormenting her for years. He's always had a temper, she'd whisper to me when Dad wasn't around. I've been protecting you and Tommy from the worst of it. The divorce happened faster than I could process. One day, Dad was packing a single suitcase, looking lost in his own home. I'm sorry, kids, he said, his voice breaking. I'll make this right, I promise. But how could he? Mom got everything in the divorce, the house, the car, even Dad's position in the company. He was left with nothing. After Dad left, Mom sat Tommy and me down for a family meeting. Things will be different now, she said, smiling in a way that didn't reach her eyes. Your father can't hurt us anymore. We're safe. Tommy, young and confused, asked, but when is Dad coming home? Mom's face hardened for a split second before she forced another smile. Oh, sweetie, Dad needs some time to work on himself. But we'll be just fine without him. I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right, but every time I tried to question Mom's version of events, she'd shut me down. You're too young to understand, Kristen, she'd say dismissively. Adult relationships are complicated. Then, barely 2 months after the divorce, Mom dropped another bombshell. Kids, I have wonderful news, she announced one evening. I'm getting married. I was stunned. Married? But it's only been 2 months since. I know it seems fast, Mom interrupted, but when you find true love, you just know. Robert and I, it was love at first sight. I felt sick. How could she move on so quickly? What about Dad? What about us? Robert, my new stepfather, moved in shortly after. He was okay, I guess. He didn't pay much attention to me, but he and Tommy seemed to hit it off. I'd hear them laughing together, playing video games, and it made me feel even more isolated. Meanwhile, Mom took over the family company, bringing Robert into work alongside her. They were always talking about business, making plans, while Tommy and I faded into the background. I felt lost, caught between the memory of what our family used to be and this new reality I couldn't quite accept. As I watched Mom and Robert coo over each other at the dinner table with Tommy happily chattering away, I couldn't help but wonder where I fit in now and what really happened between Mom and Dad. Just when I thought things couldn't get any more complicated, Mom dropped another bombshell on us. She and Robert had decided to move the company's head office to another city, supposedly more promising for business. They were planning to transfer all the capital to this new subsidiary. At first, I didn't think much of it. Sure, moving would suck, but at least we'd be together as a family, right? Wrong. One evening, as I was doing homework in my room, Mom knocked on my door. Kristen, honey, you know Robert and I are moving for work. Yeah, when do we leave? I asked, already mentally packing my room. Mom's face twisted into an expression I couldn't quite read. That's the thing, sweetie. The new house, it's not very big. And with you almost finishing high school, we thought it might be better if you stayed here. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. Stay here? But what about Tommy? Tommy's younger. He needs us more, Mom said quickly. Besides, you wouldn't want to change schools right before your exams, would you? We think it's best if you stay with your grandfather. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. They were leaving me behind. But Mom, I want to be with you and Tommy. Can't we find a bigger place? Mom's voice turned stern. Kristen, this has already been decided. It's for the best. Trust me. And just like that, my world turned upside down again. Within weeks, Mom, Robert, and Tommy were gone, and I was moving in with Grandpa. Don't get me wrong, Grandpa's great, but I felt abandoned, cast aside like I didn't fit into their new perfect family. I hoped, foolishly perhaps, that Mom and Robert would come back for me, but no, they were too busy with work to make it. Grandpa, bless him, threw me a party and let me invite my friends. It wasn't the same, but I appreciated his effort. The morning after my birthday, Grandpa called me into his home office. He had this serious look on his face as he handed me a small folder. Happy birthday, Kristen, he said, a twinkle in his eye. This is my gift to you, now that you're of age. Confused, I opened the folder and started reading the documents inside. My jaw dropped as I realized what I was holding. Grandpa, this is, he nodded, smiling. That's right, kiddo. I'm giving you the company. I was speechless. Me, running a whole company? At that moment, I wasn't thinking about running a business. He chuckled. You've got potential, Kristen. I see it in you. You'll learn, and I know you'll do great things. Then his face turned serious again. There's one more thing. I think you should reconcile with your father. Take him on as a consultant. He knows the business, and, well, I think there are some things you need to hear from him. I hesitated. After everything Mom had said about Dad, I wasn't sure I wanted to see him. But Grandpa had never steered me wrong before. I met Dad at a small cafe downtown, my stomach in knots as I approached our table. I saw him stand up, a hesitant smile on his face. He looked older, more worn down than I remembered. Kristen, he said, his voice warm but cautious. I understand you're angry. Your mother probably told you a lot of things about me. Yeah, she did, I snapped. How you were abusive, how you hit her. How could you, Dad? He took a deep breath. Kristen, what your mother told you isn't true. I need you to listen to what really happened. For the next hour, Dad laid out a story that shook me to my core. He explained how Mom had deliberately provoked him, pushing his buttons until he was at his wits' end. The night I saw her on the floor, she had staged the whole thing. Your mother took the police statement back in exchange for me not claiming any property in the divorce, Dad said, his voice heavy with pain. She set me up, Kristen. She wanted everything, and she got it. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. But why would Mom do that? And why didn't you fight back? Dad reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. Because of this, he said, pressing play on an audio file. Mom's voice filled the air between us, cold and calculating. John, here's the deal. You leave quietly, sign over everything to me, and I'll drop the charges. Fight me on this, and I'll make sure everyone believes you're an abuser. Your choice. I felt sick. Dad, why didn't you use this in court? You could have proved your innocence. He shook his head sadly. It wouldn't have changed the outcome, Kristen. Your mother had made up her mind. But more importantly, I didn't want to put you through any more pain. You were already dealing with so much in your teenage years. You need support, not more family drama. Tears welled up in my eyes. Everything I thought I knew was a lie. I'm so sorry, Dad. I should have known, should have trusted you. Dad reached across the table and squeezed my hand. It's okay, sweetheart. I'm sorry too. I know I worked too much when you were younger. I should have been there more. We sat in silence for a moment, both processing the weight of everything that had been said. Then, wiping my eyes, I remembered why I had originally reached out. Dad, there's something else I need to tell you, I said, my voice shaky but determined. Grandpa gave me the company for my 18th birthday. Dad's eyes widened in surprise, then crinkled with pride. Kristen, that's incredible. Your grandfather always had a good eye for potential. He must see great things in you. I felt a warmth spread through my chest at his words. But, Dad, I don't know the first thing about running a company. I need help. Without hesitation, Dad smiled. I'd be honored to help you, free of charge. I'll guide you through everything you need to know. As we continued talking, making plans for the future, I felt a mix of emotions: anger at Mom for her deception, sadness for what our family had lost, but also hope. Hope that with Dad's help and Grandpa's faith in me, maybe I could turn this unexpected gift into something amazing. The months flew by as I settled into my new life with Grandpa. Before I knew it, I was donning a cap and gown, graduating high school with honors. It felt surreal walking across that stage without Mom, Robert, or Tommy in the audience, but Grandpa's proud face and Dad's supportive presence made up for it. With graduation behind me, I threw myself into preparing for college. Thanks to my grades and extracurricular activities, I managed to secure a full scholarship. I decided to major in business management. After all, I had a company to run now. The day I got my acceptance letter, Grandpa insisted on throwing a little celebration, just the two of us. Some cake and a toast to the future. We were in the middle of our second slice when the doorbell rang. Grandpa frowned. "Were you expecting anyone?" I shook my head, equally confused. When Grandpa opened the door, I nearly dropped my plate. There stood Mom and Robert, looking as if they owned the place. Mom barely glanced at me, her eyes were fixed on Grandpa, her expression stormy. "Dad, we need to talk now," she said, without waiting for an invitation. She strode into the living room, Robert trailing behind her. I watched, stunned, as she rounded on Grandpa. "Why can't I access the company accounts?" she demanded. "And who gave you the right to block the capital transfer to our new subsidiary?" Grandpa stood his ground, his voice calm but firm. "Sarah, the company no longer belongs to you. It's Kristen's now." Mom's jaw dropped. For a moment, she looked like a fish out of water. Then her eyes narrowed, darting between Grandpa and me. "What do you mean it's Kristen's?" she hissed. "Exactly what I said," Grandpa replied. "I gave Kristen the company for her 18th birthday. All decisions about its future and finances are hers to make now." The shock on Mom's face quickly gave way to a simpering smile as she turned to me. "Kristen, sweetie, I've missed you so much. Why don't you come live with us? We've settled in so well in the new city." I blinked, taken aback by her sudden change in demeanor. "We have a lovely house," she continued, her voice honey sweet. "There's a big bedroom just for you, with plenty of space for a desk and computer. You could study and work from home. Wouldn't that be nice?" I felt a twinge in my chest. Part of me, the part that still longed for my mom's approval, wanted to say yes. But then I thought of everything I'd learned, everything I'd built here. "Thanks, Mom, but no," I said, surprised by the steadiness in my voice. "I'm happy here. I have my friends, my life, and Grandpa. Besides, I start college soon." The tension in the room was palpable as I stood my ground against Mom's manipulations. Her sweet demeanor quickly soured when she realized I wasn't going to be swayed. "Fine," she snapped, her voice losing its sugary coating. "If you won't come to us, we'll move back here. We can all live in our old house just like before. Wouldn't that be nice, Kristen?" I shook my head, feeling a strange mix of sadness and determination. "No, Mom, that's not going to happen either." I could see the anger building in her eyes, her facade crumbling rapidly. It was now or never. "Mom," I said, my voice steady despite my racing heart. "I want you to tell me the truth. What really happened between you and Dad? Why did you really get divorced?" For a split second, confusion flashed across Mom's face. Then, as if on cue, tears welled up in her eyes. "Oh, Kristen," she sobbed. "Your father, he was so cruel. He insulted me. He even hit me. I had to leave to protect myself, to protect you and Tommy." I felt a surge of anger at her lies. "Stop it, Mom. I know what really happened. I know you framed Dad. You set him up so you could divorce him and take everything for yourself." The tears vanished from Mom's eyes in an instant, replaced by a cold fury I'd never seen before. "How dare you," she hissed. "You ungrateful child. You have no right to meddle in my personal life." She turned to Grandpa, her voice rising. "Everything here belongs to me. I decide who lives where and who gets what." Then she rounded on me again. "You will come home right now, Kristen, and you will hand over the company to me where it belongs." I stood there, shocked by the venom in her voice, when Grandpa stepped forward, his face a storm of disappointment and anger. "That's enough, Sarah," he said, his voice low but powerful. "You seem to have forgotten a few important details. This property, including your old house, belongs to me, not you. And the company now belongs to Kristen. I gave it to her, and it's hers to do with as she sees fit." Mom's face went pale, then red with rage. She opened her mouth to argue, but Grandpa cut her off. "I've heard enough," he said firmly. "I'm ashamed of you, Sarah. I raised you better than this. Now I think it's time for you and Robert to leave. You can't kick us out." Mom shrieked. "I'm your daughter." Grandpa's expression was stone. "And Kristen is my granddaughter. A granddaughter who has shown more integrity and strength in the past few months than you have in years. Now leave, both of you." I watched a mix of emotions swirling inside me as Grandpa ushered Mom and Robert to the door. Mom's face was a mask of fury and disbelief as the door closed behind them. As the sound of their car engine faded away, I sank onto the couch, feeling drained. Grandpa sat beside me, putting a comforting arm around my shoulders. As we sat there in silence, I couldn't help but wonder what would happen next. The confrontation with Mom had been explosive, but somehow I knew it wasn't over. This was just the beginning of a new chapter in our complicated family saga. The morning after Mom and Robert's dramatic exit, I woke to the sound of hushed voices downstairs. Curiosity getting the better of me, I crept down to find Grandpa and Dad in deep conversation in the study. "Kristen," Dad said, noticing me first, "come in, sweetheart. We were just talking about you and Tommy." I entered the room, my confusion evident. "What about Tommy?" Grandpa cleared his throat. "I've asked your father if he'd be willing to seek custody of Tommy." My eyes widened. "Really? But how?" Dad nodded, a mix of determination and hope in his eyes. "Your grandfather thinks we have a strong case, especially with what he's discovered." Grandpa reached for a thick folder on his desk. "Kristen, sit down. There's something you need to see." With trembling hands, I opened the folder. Inside was a detailed report from a private investigator. As I read, I felt my world tilt on its axis once again. "Mom was cheating on you," I looked at Dad, horrified. "With Robert for years," Dad nodded grimly. "It seems so." Grandpa pointed to several documents, hotel receipts, gift records, old text messages. "Your mother and Robert had been carrying on an affair long before the divorce." "But how did the investigator get all this information?" I asked, bewildered. Grandpa's eyes narrowed. "Robert made a crucial mistake. He threw away his old phone when he bought a new one. Our investigator managed to recover it, and it was a goldmine of information." I felt sick. But why all the theatrics with the divorce then? Why accuse Dad of abuse? "It was Robert's idea," Grandpa explained, his voice heavy. "According to their messages on that old phone, he suggested she frame your father for domestic violence. It was all a ploy to ensure she got everything in the divorce." Tears stung my eyes, but Grandpa wasn't finished. "There's more," he said, turning to another section of the report. "That same phone revealed Robert's true nature. He's not who he claims to be. He's a con man, Kristen. The phone had messages with other women. He targets wealthy women, marries them, and then disappears with their money." The pieces suddenly fell into place. "That's why he was so keen on moving the company and transferring all the capital." I gasped. "He was planning to steal it all along." Grandpa nodded gravely. "Exactly. And there's one more thing you should know. I met with your mother and showed her all this evidence, but she refused to believe it. She's in deep denial about Robert's true nature and his intentions." I sat back, my mind reeling. "What do we do now?" "We fight," Dad said firmly. "For Tommy, for the company, for the truth." Grandpa nodded in agreement. "I've already called my lawyer. We're going to file for custody of Tommy and take steps to protect the company's assets." The next few months were a whirlwind of legal battles and emotional turmoil. Dad fought tirelessly for custody of Tommy. I stood by them at every step of the way, determined to bring my little brother home. The courtroom was tense as Mom tried to paint Dad as a monster, spinning tales of abuse and neglect. But her lies crumbled in the face of the mountain of evidence we had gathered. The judge listened intently as our lawyer presented the detective's findings, the recovered phone messages, the proof of Mom's affair, and the elaborate scheme she and Robert had concocted to frame Dad. I'll never forget the look on Mom's face when the judge awarded full custody to Dad. It was a mix of shock, anger, and something else, perhaps the first flicker of realization that her carefully constructed world was falling apart. The final blow came shortly after. Robert, upon learning that Mom was now left without the company, without a home, and saddled with child support payments, showed his true colors. He disappeared overnight, running off with another woman and leaving Mom with nothing but the consequences of her actions. In a desperate move, Mom tried to reconcile with Dad. I was there when she came to our old house, tears streaming down her face as she begged for forgiveness. But Dad stood firm. "I'm sorry, Sarah," he said, his voice steady. "But too much has happened. I can't trust you again. Please leave." As the door closed on Mom's pleading face, I felt a chapter of our lives ending. It was painful but also strangely freeing. Life settled into a new rhythm after that. I threw myself into my college studies, determined to learn everything I could about business management. Between classes, I'd pore over company reports with Dad, soaking up his knowledge and experience. He agreed to run the company until I graduated, giving me time to learn the ropes without the pressure of full responsibility. Tommy, still too young to fully understand everything that had happened, thrived under Dad's care. It was heartwarming to see them rebuild their relationship, to watch Tommy's eyes light up when Dad came home from work or when we all played board games together on Friday nights. We often visited Grandpa, who lived just a few blocks away. Sunday dinners became a cherished tradition, the four of us gathered around his big oak table, sharing stories and laughter. Grandpa would regale us with tales from his early days building the company, his eyes twinkling as he watched me soak up every detail. As I sit here now in my childhood bedroom that once again feels like home, I can't help but marvel at how much has changed. The path that led us here was rocky and painful, full of betrayals and hard truths, but it also led to this, a family rebuilt, stronger and closer than ever before. I know there will be challenges ahead. Running a company is no small task, and the echoes of our family drama will likely linger for years to come. But I'm not afraid. With Dad, Tommy, and Grandpa by my side, I feel ready for whatever the future holds.